Good morning. This is Bill from Curious Cars and Auto House of Naples on it's a not so bad Florida Thursday morning, I have to say. Obviously, complaining about the weather is something that I'm just going to do, and generally speaking, mid-July gives me a lot to complain about. But today, again, for whatever reason, maybe it's just we've had a lot of storms lately. The humidity, it's there, but it's only so-so. It's not oppressive. It's not murdering me. I suppose it helped that I didn't really photograph this car because it's not one of the cars for sale, but that said, it definitely isn't as bad as it could be around here. Animal activity is also quiet. I'm really happy to report. Obviously, I do hear some birds. They're out and about. None too close, which I'm happy to say. I haven't seen the woodpecker in a while, and nothing has swooped down and attacked me. So all in all, I have to say, it's a pretty damn good morning. It could be a lot worse. And I have this, which makes it just that much better, because not only are Rivieras near and dear to my heart, but this is a very special Riviera, and I'm just absolutely thrilled. There's some birds. Now they're coming in. Now, of course, because I start the video, they know when I've got my hands full, and that's when they start to make an appearance. They sense weakness, those things. Anyway, we'll keep going and hope they don't get too aggressive. I have to send a great big shout out and thank you to Uncle Johnny on this one. My friend Al's Uncle Johnny, extremely nice guy, lifelong car guy, and from what I hear, a tremendous Casanova. Another good friend of mine, an older guy, Sven, very nice cat. We'll get into him someday. He explained to me one day he saw Uncle Johnny at the airport, the Naples airport, picking up the most attractive stewardess he had ever seen in his life. Sven flew for PBA Airlines back then, and he was extraordinarily jealous. So apparently, on top of being a lifelong car guy, Uncle Johnny definitely was able to attain the ladies. And I can understand why with cars like this. I really can. You know, I text him. He's the fellow who came up with that. You saw that bird fly in. Little son of a bitch. Anyway, you remember we had that 74 Firebird, the Formula SD 455, of which they made like 90. That was an Uncle Johnny car, as was that 77 Grand Prix, which was absolutely stunning. And now this one. This is the latest in the string from this guy, and I just couldn't be any happier to have him. He's a very nice cat. He filled up the tank for me. He said, come get it, drive it as long as you want. Oh my God, if only I had really nice people like that in my life otherwise, because I definitely don't. I can tell you that right now. They are very, very few and far between around me. But here it is. So this is a 1973 Buick Riviera GS. This one came from Idaho. It's something that he tracked down especially. He got lucky with it. He really did. 12,000 or so original miles on this car. And nobody knew it when it was first initially bought. It only became apparent later when the title came out, when the parts came out, and when they noticed that the car still had the original 1973 tires on it when it was delivered. And now, as I said, a new rubber. But very, very interesting car. And, you know, who knows? Some old farmer in Idaho buys the damn thing because he loved it, stuffed it in his barn or his shed or wherever, you know, drove it to prayer meetings, which the farmer obviously was an alcoholic and Satanist of some kind, so he didn't go to too many prayer meetings, and ended up with this incredible low mileage car for the widow to sell at an auction later. So it all worked out for everybody, including Uncle Johnny. And here it is. This is the third generation Riviera, arguably the most controversial, maybe even inarguably the most controversial, and a very, very special car in many ways. It's the first Riviera came out in '63, if you remember that thing. It was probably made most famous by that Roadhouse movie. But that was an absolutely stunning, stunning car. And it was an answer to the Ford Thunderbird, which in '58 had become a four-seater and invented basically the personal luxury car market. And that's when the big three found out that there was a huge and untapped market for personal luxury cars, which would be, you know, sort of high-end, well-equipped, powerful two-door coupes that people really enjoyed. So GM had to come. They must have been caught completely off guard by it, because it took them a while to respond. I mean, in the early 60s, they did come out with the Grand Prix, and there was, some kind of hot rod Oldsmobile. What the hell was it? I tell you what, man, the coronavirus whiskey, which of course I'm still doing, definitely takes a toll. The Starfire, forgive me, there was an Oldsmobile Starfire, the Pontiac Grand Prix. They were the first sort of stabs at the personal luxury coupe, but the Riviera was the first true built from the ground up answer to the Ford Thunderbird. And that was designed by a guy named Bill Mitchell, who's come up a lot. In fact, we reviewed that 64 Corvette last week, and Bill Mitchell featured very heavily in that. But he was the guy responsible for the first Riv, with another guy named Ned Nichols, I think, who actually did the designing, which was Mitchell's style. He kind of came up with the theme and then counted on his designers. But anyway, they came out with that car. It didn't outsell the Ford, didn't even come close, but it did very, very well. It was a great halo car for GM. People found it interesting, and it helped GM's image, and it earned a rank for Riviera amongst the permanent marks of the Buick lineup. And Buick was a very strong mark for GM, so that wasn't an easy thing to do. But anyway, there it was. So that thing was out. It was doing pretty well. But in 1967, out came, well, it was a 66 maybe, out came a new one, the second generation Riv, which was elegant and nice and agile. Not as the first generation, but nice. It was designed by a guy named David Halls, who we'll get into in a minute, because all of this is a real tangled web. But anyway, the second generation Riv started out pretty cool, but just became bloated. By the time 1970 rolled around, the thing had fender skirts and was just not, the Riviera of old. People were sort of starting to get disinterested in it, and sales were slumping. So Mitchell decided that he wanted to make a classic. And you have to remember, Mitchell was a pretty old guy. He started his career at GM in the 1930s, like 1935. So his inspirations were not really the same as any modern guy at the time, and he was in love with the speedsters and Boattail stuff of the 1930s. If you remember the incredible Auburn Speedster, one of the most beautiful cars of all time, this was an absolute favorite of Bill Mitchell, and it had made its way into the 63 Corvette Stingray, more famously probably. And Mitchell decided he wanted to apply that same thing to the Riviera. So he, got a drive. I can't remember the first guy who drew the car in the 60s, but it was drawn by some guy. And then it went on to the second stage, which was run by a guy named Jerry Hirschberg, the designer, under Bill Mitchell, and David Halls, by the way, giving input as well. And this is where it all gets a bit convoluted and interesting. But so Hirschberg starts drawing this thing out based on the original drawings from the other cat I can't remember. And they decide that it's going to be this beautiful, smaller, agile, powerful car based on the A Special platform, maybe the A platform. And that gets in. I'm going to link to these videos in the bottom because we get into all this stuff. But the Monte Carlo and the Grand Prix were on A Special platforms, which were slightly larger versions of the A. I hate all this GM platform crap. I really do. But it's important enough to these cars that you kind of have to know it. So anyway, the Monte Carlo and the Grand Prix were running around on the A Special platform, which was kind of a larger than the A platform, mid-sized, pretty agile thing. And Buick and Mitchell and Halls, who was chief designer for Buick, they all wanted to put in this Riviera on that platform. So they designed it for that. And it was absolutely stunning. The drawings, the first clay model, which came out, apparently had a big V windshield, and everything was cool, everything was going forward, and it looked pretty neat. Then they ran into trouble, which we'll get into in a second. The problem with that was GM by this stage had started to try and save money, and they were doing some cross-platform stuff. There's the text coming in. Put that on. And what the hell is going on over there? Holy shit. Look at this. We have giant birds up there. Look at those things. Jesus, and this one's coming in over here. There's one up in the tree. This could be it. This could be the thing that I've feared for a long time. There's some giant suckers, and it looks like they're staging all around me. I don't know if those are vultures. I don't know what the hell they are, but they look like they're ready to come down and get me. So, look, if the camera falls, breaks, you know, and silence, well, that means that somebody found the camera and uploaded it. So I guess none of you out there can help me, but anyway, we'll see what happens. I don't even remember how I am now. Okay, cross-engineering, cross-platforming, that's where I was. So GM was starting to kind of save money. When you took a car like the Riviera was going to be put on this A platform, it would have shared sheet metal and other bits with nothing. The Monte Carlo and the Grand Prix, they were able to draw from the Chevelle, the Malibu, and the Tempest. They used the glass, they used some of the body panels, quite a bit of stuff, and that saved some money. Now, if Buick had put this on the A Special platform, it would have shared stuff with basically no car, and it would have become pretty damn expensive to build. And that, of course, becomes a problem for the GM accountants. They're not going to like that at all. So the commonality would have been shit. They would have, had to spend a lot of money. It would have been a nice halo car, but just too much to build. So GM President Ed Cold said, the hell with it, and he X'd it out. He took it off the A platform and said, if you're going to build this thing, you're going to have to put it on the full-size Buick B platform. You're going to have to get rid of the V front windshield. You're going to have to share all the glass, with the exception of the rear, which unfortunately is fogged up right now, with the other cars on the B platform. So the LeSabre and I believe the Centurion. And the designers were just pissed off. I mean, they had made this little, nimble, beautiful, stunning clay model and mock-up of an A-platform Riviera with perfect proportions, and now they had to change that. They had to stretch it out over the enormous full-size B platform with its perimeter frame and make all of these. You know, this was not a simple car to design. I mean, you see the side with the swooping. We'll get into the styling features in a minute, but I mean, this was a very special car, and this was Bill Mitchell towards the end of his career going for a classic. So all of a sudden, they had to change virtually everything and put it on this bigger platform. Instead of being a smaller, lighter, more nimble car, it was going to end up being a bigger car than the second generation Riv. And as a result, this is where it became controversial. I mean, it's thought of today as a beautiful car, and I really do agree with that. I guess it's not to everybody's taste, and from some angles it's a little weird. So I think they did a tremendous job. But at the time, they were disappointed. They were kind of bummed out that their design had to be bastardized and placed over this big. I mean, it went from, again, something they wanted to make smaller to something that was inches and inches bigger. And that may please your average lady friend, but it's not going to please these designers. So, but they did it. They swooped it out, and they made it what it needed to be. But it ended up sharing the windshield with the LeSabre and the side glass, and the rest of the car was sort of built around that. They did get the front end they wanted to an extent, the sort of V-front swooping hood, 4 headlamps, V-bumper thing. By the time this 73 rolled around, the bumper had been stretched out for all the federal standards at the time. A little bit of a shame. If you look at the 71, the bumper is significantly more elegant. They did retain the V, thank God, and some other features, but they had to have those big rubber-looking battering rams up front. And it did remove some of the sleek elegance of the car. Anyway, that said, they did put it together. This guy, who the hell was his name at the time? I'm telling you, Bob Kessler. He was the head of Buick. He had liked the Boattail. He thought it was a pretty neat car. He was there for the development and the beginning of where it was going to start being produced. But then he retired, and a guy named Lee Mays came in. And Lee Mays had been moved from Chevy. He was the general sales manager there until he got into a pissing contest with the new head of Chevy, a guy you may have heard of. His name was John DeLorean. And they sent him over to run Buick. So now Lee Mays is in charge of Buick. He's a crabby old son of a bitch with no sense of style at all, and he hates specialty cars. He wants everything to sort of be stamped and profitable. He did not like the Riviera, and he did not like this Boattail. So he and Bill Mitchell got into a lot of yelling matches over it. Apparently it was an unpleasant thing, and Hirschberg in later memoirs said the whole process, everything after the switch from the A Special platform just became miserable. It was a really unpleasant time for everyone at Buick. So that's the attitude with which this car was launched, and it was kind of a shame. And in fact, Lee Mays is probably the reason not only that the 73 got a more muted Boattail in the back, but also why it just, I mean, 3 model years, come on, 71 through 73 for the Boattail, then it was gone. That was definitely, Lee Mays' intervention. He just apparently was something of a tremendous bastard. So anyway, it became the subject of, much debate, but it was too late in the process for them to do anything, so they just went ahead and released it. The public at the time had it was not a negative reaction, but it was not overly positive either. I mean, this thing did not look like any other car on the road at all, and frankly, I think that's fantastic. At the time, the public may not have. They didn't hate it, but they weren't quite sure. But it was really, to me, the last of the bespoke Rivieras. You know, when you could get a car from General Motors that didn't look like 12 other cars from the other divisions of GM. Nothing else had this, short of that 63 Corvette Stingray, the mid-year Corvette, 63 through 67. And here's where things get a little bit weird. Again, this rear end, which, by the way, in 73 had been muted. You could see that, I'll show a picture of the 71 and 2, had a much more pointy stinger from the Boattail. Probably Lee Mays was responsible for that. But very much invoking the 63 Corvette, which, based on that video that I did the other day, and I'll link to that, was robbed from the 38 Adler Trumpf Ren limousine. I mean, this stuff is so... Oh, boy. And all the players are the same. That's what's fascinating to me, other than Larry Shinoda. But you've got Bill Mitchell involved, who did the Stingray. David Halls, now the chief design of Buick, forgive me, he was the guy who met Reuben Halprin at the Michigan State Fair, who was driving the Adler Trumpf, convinced him to take it to the GM Tech Center for photos. He had nothing to do with Buick at that time. He was just, standard GM engineer. And that's where they snapped all the pictures, gave the car back to Reuben Halprin, the Adler Trumpf, and said, thank you so much for bringing it, pissing off Halprin for the rest of his life because he thought GM was going to buy that car and, give him a very tidy profit. So, and now Halls and Mitchell are there when this Boattail come out for Buick. So, yeah, again, quite a little tangled web that's going on there. But anyway, out it came. It was short-lived, 71 through 73. It was very expensive. It was unlike any other car on the road. Journalists didn't quite know what to do with it. They didn't hate it, they didn't love it, but they did love the mechanicals and they did love the handling, even if they found the price tag a little bit staggering. This was not a cheap car under any stretch of the imagination. And there it is. So anyway, that's where it was birthed. 74 kept the same platform, same front end, but gone was that distinctive, incredibly cool Boattail rear for something that was creased and fenderized and normal looking, and sales went down considerably. And they never really regained steam until the Riviera was designed and redesigned for 1979 in a way that people liked again. And then they downsized that in 86 and people hated it. So, yeah, anyway, what are you going to do? It's a long and tangled web. But that is the way the Riviera was born, this third generation, and why it's considered controversial today. It's not the car that was originally planned, but it is also incredibly unique in the GM lineup, and from certain angles, it retained the absolute gorgeousness of the original mock-ups. And I think, by the way, this is one of those angles. Really, really stunning. It also used the sweep spear style. Now, and in fact took it further. If you look at the 49 Roadmaster, it had this. You see the way the line comes off the top of the fender there, starts swooping down through the door, comes to a point before the rear wheel, and then goes back up again in a nice curvature, and this in fact has taken it far enough to where the whole fender is set up that way. That was a trim option on the 49 Riviera, the trim plate on the Roadmaster, that proved really popular for Buick and then sort of became a design feature and was again implemented into this car. So that was a Buick design feature at the time called the sweep spear, and it's what gives this car these sort of big, cool rear haunches, and it's just neat to look at. So anyway, there it is. What I'm going to do is pause for a minute, and then we'll get more into this specific car. Bear with me. All right, so no word from that bird. It's still sitting up there, still eyeing me. I have no idea what the hell it is, but it looks menacing, and I think it's a vulture. And I don't know if they only go after dead things or if they kill things and then go after them. So I guess we're going to find out as we go. Anyway, back to the car. So the most interesting design feature, far and away, without any doubt, is of course this curved and fascinating rear back glass that's part of the sweeping boat tail. And from what I understand, from what I read, it was an incredible design, not a design nightmare, a manufacturing nightmare. I mean, it was very expensive and very hard to put in. You can see it's got a separation in it, and sorry again about all the mist. I can't really help it with this is even with limited humidity. But you see the line running up the middle. That's actually a stress break in the glass that allows it to flex a little bit so that the glass wouldn't break when it was installed or when the body is flexing. And you know, I suppose that would have been rectified in the Corvette initially by the split window, and then it must have been small enough it didn't matter, so they got away with it. But with one this size and with a chassis that wasn't quite as stiff as the Corvette, that window needed to be able to flex a little bit. So there it is. But that was, it is obviously the most distinguishing feature. As I pointed out, the stinger part of the Boattail got muted for this year. The original, the 71, had these really cool vents in the top of the trunk that they then did away with really quick when they came out with a different ventilation system in 72. And much more of a V and swoop to the bumper. They moved the taillights into the bumper for this year. And anyway, all of it very, very cool. But let's have a look inside the trunk. I haven't done this, so I have no idea what's in here. What we'd expect, a spare tire. So everything looking, I can't believe this car. It's such a time machine. I don't think anyone's even vacuumed this trunk in the last 50 years, and it still looks like this. See the, look at that, the original little cardboard sheath around the lug wrench and the jack, and the original 73 spare tire. This thing's such a time machine, man. Really, really cool. Even the guys at Buick, they must have had a little more pride than the guys at Pontiac. Those stickers are off a little bit, the way they've been slapped on, but they're not terrible. But anyway, there it is, and all very fascinating. Pretty good trunk area. You know, not great, by the way, for the year. I mean, when you looked at the trunks on cars made in 73, they were pretty friggin' enormous. For a car that was zeroing in on the 225 Electra, I mean, we're talking about, the thing was like, what, 218 inches or something? The thing was enormous, 4,500-pound car. This is a pretty small trunk for a car with that wheelbase. But anyway, there it is, and all very cool. I also like the way that they do a Riviera by Buick. You know, it's obviously it's meant to be a special car, and that does pan. I also love the door handles. That does pan out in the details, like this door handle. Nice way you grab it, reverse hinged, very, very cool, and a pretty neat styling feature. So, you know, despite the trials and tribulations, the guys did manage to put together a pretty neat piece. This is going to be hard one-handed. This hood weighs a lot. Oh my God. But there it is, and there you see the engine. You know, it's got a little bit of sort of corrosion, whatever, on top of the original. But I mean, this is untouched. This car is not restored, and you know, this is just the way it looks after sitting in Idaho for good God, what, 47 years? I mean, it's absolutely incredible. Now, by the time 73 rolled around, in this Grand Sport car, the Hypo engine did not come standard. You had to order that now, and it would have been denoted by a badge in the front grille that said Stage 1. In 71 and 72, when you ordered this, the Grand Sport package, you would have gotten the Hypo engine, which amounted for 10 extra horsepower. And it also happened right in the middle of the change from gross to net horsepower. So the 71 is rated at like 330, 340 or something, and then the 72, I believe, it's when it goes into net and it becomes 250 horsepower, 260 for the Hypo. That could also be 270, but whatever, what the hell, who cares? But it is Buick's big 455 V8 with a 4-barrel, big block car, and they did lower the compression because of the beginning of all the emission stuff. Thank God there's no catalytic converter on this, but they still did lower the compression. While that might have been a bad thing at the time, because of course the horsepower went down, although I think it only went down like 10 or something. It's not so bad today, because when you have 8.5 to 1 compression, on this car, it means you can kind of get away with super unleaded gas, and you're not going to hurt the valves too much. You get into the higher compression engines, and they require a bit more care, when you're buying a real hot rod from the late 60s or something. So, the fact that emissions came out in some ways makes these early emission type big blocks a little bit easier to deal with today, and a little bit more amenable to the pump gas that we have. So it works out all right. You can see it's got air conditioning, nice, of course, a Riviera wood, and everything looking, proper under the hood. Not perfect, not concours, but as they say, a car is only original once, and this thing is the way that it came from GM, and that's pretty damn neat. Lucky enough, all of these cars came with the Turbo Hydra 400 tranny. The Turbo Hydra 400 transmission, which is one of the most bulletproof and loved transmissions of all time. It just was a fantastic transmission. Ended up in Rolls-Royce products, Bentley products. A lot of different people used the Turbo Hydra 400 because it would handle gobs of horsepower. You couldn't throw too much horsepower at it. Had smooth, lovely shifts, and was just a terrific unit. This also used a recirculating ball steering setup, which was very sporty for the time, particularly for a big Luxo barge like this. Not quite 3 turns lock to lock, like 2.94, which is even on par with that mid-year Corvette we did. So it had very sporty steering for a big luxury car of the time. It also had independent suspension up front with wishbones and coil springs, and beefed up for this GS version, which truly makes it just a better handling car. And in the rear, it had a live axle 4-link coil spring suspension that handled really good. And the road tests at the time, and here's another video I'll link to, there's a great one from the 70s when it came out, the drivers were stunned at how well this thing handled. You're talking about a 4,500 pound car, more or less. It weighed a shitload, and it was huge, and they were shocked that it could handle itself the way that it did. Also had power assisted front disc brakes, very nice, rear drums, and the stopping power was considered very good at the time. So mechanically, the car was all there. It really held true to the prior Riviera, certainly the 63 and 4 Riv, which was considered a very good handling car, and so too was this one, which again doesn't really fit with how it looks and the dimensions of it, which seem insane, but it worked out pretty great. So anyway, everything nice under the hood of this thing. One interesting feature you could get with these cars was a very early traction control system called Max Trac. It cost like 91 bucks on the window sticker, which sounds cheap, but I guess was fairly expensive at the time. And what that had was an actual little computer under the hood that read sensors on the drive shaft and one of the front wheels, and would retard the... Every time I say that, I think of Dalton. Anyway, it would retard the timing to cut engine power to help the tires bite, and was essentially a very nice early traction control system. And nobody opted for it, but it was cool. But they did do away with it a couple of years later. There it is. Quite a slam. I like that sticker. I'm not sure if that's some sort of thing that would have come off on most. The 3975. I don't know if that's I don't know what the hell it is, but there it is, and yeah, it's still on there. This one has a canopy vinyl top. That would have been an option at the time. A canopy top means it's at the front of the car, going towards the C-pillar back here, and then stopping where there's a hoop over the hood, and that's quite nice. It also has a little strengthening line in the center, not unlike those mid-year Corvettes. Here you see the image of the that spear-shaped side, V-spear. God, I forget all this crap. I really do. Spear swept. I don't know, whatever the hell it is. But anyway, pretty neat lines on the car. And the spear thing relates only really to the trim. The fact that the whole fender does it is just a bonus. There you see the Riviera script on the front fender, and of course the GS badge beneath it, denoting it had that option package. Also nice trim around the wheel wells and the absolutely gorgeous mag wheels that you would get on the Grand Sport models. Beautiful, beautiful wheels on this car. Lovely chrome mirror, lovely V-swept hood area going into that V front. The car, you know, again, I really wish they had gotten their plan and done it on the A special frame, because I think we would be talking about a car that was much more valuable today and much more beloved than this one. And you know, even though these are very appreciated and they're taking off, boy oh boy, would it have been neat to have a lighter, powerful Riviera with a big block and, you know, something mid-size that really hauled ass. That just would have been cool. This one had optional fender indicators. I actually did a little video of them this morning on my way here, so I'm going to give myself a little pause here to inject that and have a look at it. Alright, thought I'd interject this real quick on the way to the shoot site, Peter's place. You can see the illumination in this thing. Unusually perfect for one of these vintage cars, I have to say. Sometimes you get in the nicest old classic, you get in it at night, you hit the lights, and everything's fizzled. I mean, the illumination is shit. In this car, pretty good preservation. And remember, I'm not trying to sell it. This is just me kind of, you know, enjoying it. This is a private car. I don't own it. And it's not for sale. But it's pretty wild to see the dash as it would have been in 1973. I really don't see any difference at all. Up front, you can see it's got the marker lamps on the fender. That'll tell you when your signals are on, like that. You can see them flashing. And also when you hit the high beams, I believe that's going to show up there, if I can find the damn high beam switch. Yeah, it changes the lights on the front, so pretty neat stuff, and cool to see. Alright, so that was that. And there's that curved windshield, which again it shared with the LeSabre. You see it has a little hint of a V there in the front. I couldn't find any pictures of that original design with the V windshield, but I'd love to see it. That would have been kind of cool. And otherwise, there it is. Again, Lee Mays probably made this rear end become a little bit more muted by 73 and then gone altogether the next year. You've got a flip down gas door there, kind of hard to get to, mind you. You really would have had to bend over. For the old guys buying this thing, that would have been tough. We've got a big dent here in the back, and nobody really knows, but it looks like a goddamn hammer or something. Makes me wonder if the guy's wife didn't get pissed off over something. We did talk about how they used to name hurricanes after women for their destructive tendencies, but anyway, there it is. So what I'm going to do is get my crap inside the car, and then we're going to continue and go for a drive. Alright, so after this car went away in 73, you know, 74 it was essentially gone, at least in this formation. It lived a bit of an ignominious life for the next 25 years or so. It was relegated sort of to the back end of the car lots. Nobody quite knew what to think of it. It became quite famous, actually, in the TV and the movies. I mean, it was something that got used quite a fair bit. And I don't know if that's because of its distinctive styling or what, but it showed up a lot. Most famously for me, it was in Thunderbolt and Lightfoot, that early 70s movie with, that's when it was new, by the way, so this doesn't really count towards what I'm saying, but that was Jeff Bridges and Clint Eastwood, they robbed one off some nice old couple and, drove it in a rather frenzied fashion as part of their flee from Clint Eastwood's former gang members who were shooting at him in chase scenes and stuff. And the Riv played pretty prominently in that. It was also in The Last Boy Scout. I think Bruce Willis, he blew one up. Nicolas Cage, I could do a whole video on Nicolas Cage. I really could. I mean, how the hell did that guy make it? Probably nothing to do with the people he's related to. But anyway, Nicolas Cage drove one to great success in Red Rock West, I believe. In fact, they jumped one in front of a train or something. And that car featured rather heavily in that, so that was neat. It also was in some druggy movie called Go in '99 with some broad who ended up marrying Tom Cruise. Fletch drove one, Chevy Chase, in that '85 movie. I don't remember. I haven't seen that movie since like '85, so I don't remember if he drove it extensively or not. It was not the famous Oldsmobile Buick that he talked about. That was a Nova looking thing, but anyway, it appeared in that. And what the hell? There was one more. Last Boy Scout, Red Rock West. It was in Lethal Weapon 3. Don't remember its role in that, but it was in that, if I recall correctly. And anyway, then it showed up in just a bunch of, it was all over Kojak and Chips and all of these sort of 70s and 80s TV shows that had driving. But it was mostly driven by like the hoods and the gangsters and the bad guys, the way a 12 or 15-year-old high-end Mercedes or Audi would be today. So it's only recently that they've really started spiking in the collector world. Young people have gotten an interest in them, and they've become significantly more valuable. Quick shout out, by the way, and that Audi we did a few weeks ago, the A8L, that I said under no circumstances should anyone ever buy. Andrew is running that on Cars and Bids. It's for sale right now, and he actually ran the video. God bless him. That thing's going to finish for nothing. The whole video on that thing is why nobody should buy that car, and there it is being highlighted in his auction. So I don't know. I love Andrew to death, but he is not at all normal. Anyway, let's just get into this thing. God, what a machine, man. I love the color. I love the styling. I really do. Okay, inside, and I'm not sure if I should be moving forward because the sun's starting to beat down, but we'll go anyway. How do I put this? It's luxurious, it's spacious, and it's beautiful, but it is still in the era now where GM had started cross-platforming. So if you look at a 63, 64 Riv, everything in that car was unique to that. And there's some things in this car that are unique to it, but quite a bit of it is still that, this door panel is probably not at all unlike the one that was on the LeSabre. And that, to me, was a little bit of a shame, but I suppose it was inevitable that GM would start doing that. You could get an unbelievable array of options in these cars. You could make them extraordinarily expensive. I want to say the base price was in the $5,000 or $6,000 range, and you could probably make them cost $8,000 or $9,000 by the time you were done with them. And even though at the time the Mark IV was going on, I think that outsold this car. I think this is a much cooler car than the Mark IV. But anyway, I digress. It's also a pillarless coupe. So you see there's no window frames around it. When those go down, you just have the top of the door. These back windows also go down, which is very cool. And when they do, it leaves you this giant side opening, which, is, of course, a classic GM thing. That got lost a couple of years later when the Colonnade cars came out for safety regulation. The feds, of course, put a damper on everything, and that was the end of that. But back seats, you're Canadian. Let's see how they're going to be. Yeah, you know what? They're going to be pretty damn chipper. You've got room for 3 going across. You've got a giant package shelf, so you could put your toddlers up there if you've got too many adults in the car. Unfortunately, when you hit the brakes, the toddlers are going to come flying forward. There's no net or anywhere you could put a bungee down, but if you take it easy, they'll be fine. And leg room, well, of course, the thing is the size of a friggin' Electra. So actually, honestly, for that, the leg room is kind of shit, but it's good enough. You'll be able to sit back there and it's fine. And I like the styling of the vinyl with the little buttons and the lines and the wood trim. And Yeah, it's all neat. You see the seat belts up top still tucked up. We're going to leave them there. There's no reason to use them. And everything looking cool. This one has, rare for a GS, it's got the 60/40 seat option without the center console. A lot of GSs would have had the full-length center console. So whoever was the farmer must have had a big family. He thought he wanted to take them with him to the prayer meetings or the Asian massage or whatever it is Idahoan farm workers or farm owners do when they're on their time off. Again, with the seat belts down here, love the chrome alumini trim around everything, the little buttony things. The seats are incredibly comfortable. This is from the era before every car having to be sporty and German, where it didn't, now they have to sort of hold you in as you're cornering. There was no thought of that back then. This was just meant to be a big, comfortable highway cruiser, even if it did have a performance edge to it. You do, of course, power windows. You've got a 6-way power seat. Very, very nice stuff. Did not come with the door locks, but did come with the remote mirror. In 73, they went to a wood trim, which you can see on the dash, or sorry, on the door panel here. And then we'll get into it as we hop behind the wheel. Let's fire this thing up. You get a real nice, healthy growl out of this. One thing I love about this car has 12,000 miles, and it's true. It's documented. And again, it came with the original tires, which are still saved, so it's inarguable. This is a 12,000-mile 73 Buick, and as such, it feels like it would have felt when you were driving a new one. And there is that big V8 firing to life and sounding the way it would have sounded back in 73. Let me hop out for a minute and let's see if we get a little bit of a rumble. Yeah, you do, and it sounds great, but again, these mufflers, you got a car that's got 100,000 miles, the mufflers are kind of blown out the material a little bit and it sounds louder. These things are still so fresh, it's muffling it as much as it would have back when it was new, which is almost a little bit of a shame. There you can see I can run the rear window down on either side. Pretty cool stuff, and very nice. Another interesting feature is this curved dashboard. BMW did this as well, sort of angling all the stuff at the driver. Although I will say, by the time this car is out, they're not really giving you much. I mean, most of the gauges have been replaced with red lights, which, red lights are fine. They're great, except by the time one comes, they might as well just have one red light that says your engine is seized. Because by the time one of them comes on, it's pretty much over anyway. I mean, gauges, at least you can see what's going on. With the red lights, it's pretty much done when it's done. You've got a neat little wiper washer thing that's tiny. I don't know how old guys would have found it at the time. Here's your AC system, lovely. Here's your headlights. You got a clock over here. This one did not go very option-y on the radio. You could have gotten an AM/FM 8-track or AM 8-track or whatever. This is just an AM/AM sonomatic that I can't even get to turn on. Yeah, maybe needs a fuse or something, but I do like the angle of the cockpit. It also has a tilt wheel, very nice, lovely feature. I do like the Buick script on vertically there. I think that's kind of neat. Over here you've got another Buick Riviera script in wood. In the 71, 72s, they had that machine turned aluminum like you got in the Trans Ams, the second gen Trans Ams, which I quite like. People liked wood at the time, so they got rid of that, but I think I'd prefer that machine turned dash. I think that just looks really cool. What do you have down here? The world's biggest ashtray, probably, because people really did smoke back then. In fact, correctly so, it even still has some ashes in there from the farmer. He probably smoked Winston's. And then you got a nice big glove box there with a little bit of steering wheel cover and some sort of tag and your tire inflation shit. So anyway, all very nice and proper. Up here you've got sun visors, which you'd expect, no mirrors, so if you get a little powder on your nose, it's not going to matter. You've got the original headliner nice and tight, and of course those big seat belts. Let's get our column shifter and go. The Turbo Hydra 400 is a 3-speed, so no overdrive, but you're not going to care. You're just not. Look at that big, expansive hood in front of you with the fender indicators. It's so friggin' 1970s, man. It is so cool. It's just the absolute tail end of an era. I mean, it's like when this car pulls up, it's like, you know, take a good look, because you're not going to see anything like this again for a very, very long time. And that was really the truth. I mean, Lincoln kept things going for a while. Cadillac kept things going for a while. But by the time this car came out, it was pretty much over. And then years later, when the SUVs started to gain popularity, that spelled doom for the personal luxury coupe. And, you know, now they're just sort of an asterisk. Maybe they're making a bit of a comeback now. I don't know. Maybe. But not really. Not the way they were. They were everywhere. There's a rabbit. Look at that thing. Hope he doesn't call in any of his friends. I've seen those things attack, and it's not pretty. Let's see how... You know, Dalton didn't do the windshield on this, so probably nobody has. It's not bad. All right, so anyway, here we go. Instant torque from that V8. Of course, it's a big block, so it gives you what you need. In that road test I talked about from the 70s, they got wheel spin out of it when they did their 0 to 60 times. And the guy even noted at the time, it's weird to get wheel spin out of a 4,500 pound car, but we did. Of course, they did also test the GS option, which gave it the 342 posi traction, which of course worked in conjunction with that big block to give it pretty good usable torque right off the get-go. There's a suicidal squirrel in front of us. Go on. Nice induction sound from that. It's got a Rochester Quadrajet on the big block, and of course, man, this is such a nice driver's car. It really is. It's a beautiful cruiser. And it is surprisingly quick. I want to say 0 to 60 times are in the 8s. Quarter mile times, just a hair under 16. You know, for an emissions era car, or at least the beginning of it, this thing's pretty friggin' peppy. I can only imagine how it would have been if it had the same drivetrain in the A platform. All right, so we got a little bit of time before we can pull out into traffic. And I tell you what, I'll just shut up for a little while and let you hear the way this thing sounds and cruises. Yeah, so keeping up with traffic is not going to be an issue at all. It has a very, very nice get up and go. Tracking down the road, again, pretty good recirculating ball. That Saginaw steering feels nice, feels smooth. You know, it doesn't hurt that this thing has 12,000 miles on it, so everything's nice, tight, and together. But you could really feel it. This was a pretty cool car at the time, and understandably why it was, I imagine the target market was probably 30 to 60-year-old cool cats who kind of drove it around and dated stewardesses. Probably had some kind of nice split-level house. God, the tire noise on that truck is ridiculous. Time to change those. They are trail rated. Yeah, I'd like to get that thing out of the Mojave Desert. Anyway, so there it is. What an incredible piece. This is a 73 Buick Riviera GS. It's got the 455, as basically every Riviera did. It's third generation, last of an era. One of the most controversial cars, frankly, from Buick, styled by Bill Mitchell et al., and is considered to be a pretty neat piece. And they're really going up in value. You kind of missed your chance to get them cheap. That's over. If you find a real nice one, you're going to pay for it. And that's a shame. It's always nice when the cool cars are missed by the collector world, but if you look at the price curve on this thing, they've really peaked. So, look, thank you very much for having a look. Appreciate it. I see it in the comments. Oh, the Cordoba's never coming. It's never coming. Yes, it is. It is. I mean, I'm telling you that nature and other factors have combined to slow it down, but we are going to have that damn Cordoba, guaranteed, within the next week or so. Maybe 2, maybe 3. It's coming. And some other neat stuff. So thanks for having a look. Appreciate it, and we will see you with the next one. Take care.